right. So for people who have actually never seen a therapist or went to counseling before, they might be wondering, you know, what kinds of changes would they be seeing or observing in themselves that might indicate that maybe it's time to reach out and ask for help. If you've never done that before, taken that step, what kinds of things or changes, behaviors, signs that might they be seeing in their own experience that could encourage them to think about asking for help?
Yeah, well, I think some of the things that are coming up for people is our stress response. And stress responses can be really different between people. But, you know, like when we think about this time that we have right now, where a lot of us, unless you're a frontline worker, or an essential worker, we're at home, which sounds great in theory. But, you know, we might be experiencing things like noticing that we're getting irritable faster, or having less patience for things, or getting easily frustrated by things. These are all stress responses. You know, we may not recognize it as being a stress response, but it actually is a stress response. So those things, you know, just being short, not being able to focus or concentrate on tasks at hand, like just finding like, I just feel like I'm all over the place, is another stress response that we're having now. You know, we're not actually able to focus on this because there's something else that I can't quite put my finger on that is actually taking my attention away from things. So if you know, if we're noticing, or if you're noticing that there's just things that are off, like, I don't understand. I thought, you know, I'd be able to, you know, be cleaning everything, and I'd be right on top of all this other stuff, and none of that is actually happening, and I don't understand why. It's a stress response. Yeah. And not just because we're having a stress response doesn't mean that we need to have therapy. But if it's getting to the point where you're really questioning, like, why am I getting so frustrated over this? This is really not a big deal. Or why can't I just focus in and do this? Then that might be a sign that, hey, you know what? Maybe having a conversation with someone, a mental health professional, a psychotherapist, somebody, I might benefit from that, you know? So to kind of get through what is it that's happening for you, and what are some of the things you can do to kind of bring things back down and back to being in check. Yeah. Is that helpful?
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Mm-hmm.
I think that noticing our stress responses and being able to find solutions and tools to manage our emotional responses is huge. It may not sound like a huge quote unquote issue, and yet it's taking away or detracting from your contentment, your happiness, your resilience, your ability to navigate what's going on around you and engage with it. One other element for me is that I think this time, this unusual, unprecedented time, is really making us aware that we can't get away from ourselves. Mm-hmm. Like we can't. We just cannot escape ourselves. And I think, certainly in our society, I think we've largely become content with distracting ourselves from ourselves. So it's really easy to find other things to do and to be busy. And now most of those techniques have been taken away from us in some way. So now we're really faced with who we are and what's going on inside us. And that's a perfect reason to be able to go and talk to somebody, tell somebody your story. You know, in therapy, you've got the benefit of somebody who is actively listening to you. And right now, think about how many family members are actively listening to you week after week. Like having somebody actively listen is huge. Most of us are distracted when we're listening to each other. So to be able to seek out therapy, to have somebody actively listening to you, and then helping you to find those inner resources, helping you to learn new tools to access those inner resources, that's huge. Huge. And really, even when the pandemic's over, you can't get away from yourself. So we're going to have to figure this out. We're going to have to find those inner resources. And it's a great opportunity to access therapy, just to tune in to what's going on internally and how do I navigate me.
Yeah, and I think what you were just saying, Sarah Angela, about, you know, that we have all this time with ourselves. For some people, that can be very uncomfortable, right? Having more time with ourselves. And so, you know, going back to what I was saying a few minutes ago about the stress response, you know, another indicator is if you're avoiding yourself, doing things like maybe drinking more or engaging in other behaviors that are just ways of avoiding things, then that's another stress indicator, right? Yeah. Sorry,
or
Sarah.
somebody along those lines, it's somebody who suddenly has to be the caregiver for everyone. So now you're baking cookies and you have to drop them off on somebody's porch, and now you have to make a card, and now you have to get your kids to do the sign. And it's that I have to do this and caretake other people because I can't be with me. It's scary.
Yes. Yeah.
The reality is it's just taking time to be with you and then discovering that you're actually pretty cool in spite of your own fears about who you might be inside. You know, it's like it's scary sometimes for people to be alone with themselves. And even people who are absolute introverts and love this opportunity to be at home and don't have to socialize. There's a lot of people in that scenario too. And for those introverts, there's equally distractions to stay away from meeting yourself again.
Yeah.
As you're talking, it makes me think of like my own personal experience. Like, you know, it was many years ago that I actually went and sought therapy for myself for the first time. And I remember how much courage it took for me to do that at that time, because I think I had a misunderstanding around what it was going to mean to participate in that, what it meant about me as a person needing to go and seek that kind of support. Was I being weak? Was I not managing my stuff? Could I not handle my emotions? You know, and the process of being able to sit down, just as you say, Sarah Angela, and have someone actively, meaning like putting their attention on listening to what you're saying and absorbing what you're saying, and then having them validate those emotions and those feelings and those thoughts that I was having. I didn't realize until I actually experienced the process of therapy how effective that is at diffusing stress in a person's life. And actually, it's not just, you know, the weight that gets lifted just by going through the process of sitting down with someone who's not related to you, doesn't know your history, you know, has no previous knowledge of your story, and just being able to tell your story about where you are in that moment. It was so incredibly like just it lifted this weight off my shoulders. And every time I would go to a therapy session, I would skip out of the therapy session. I would go in with my shoulders hunched, feeling, you know, like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. And every time I left, I felt like I was just going to go kick butt, like I was ready to take on the world, because here was this person who had taken all of this time and put all this effort into learning how to help human beings deal with stress and learn coping mechanisms. And she had all these great suggestions for me. I didn't have to go research them myself. I didn't have to look them up, because she was a professional and she knew these things and suggested them to me. And I went and tried them. Then I came back and told her how it went. And it was so valuable. So like from my perspective, I highly recommend that you just give it a try, right? Like you don't have anything to lose. And for me, it was a really effective way to deal with stress.
Yeah, and I think if there was, a way to let people know that, you don't have to wait until you're in a crisis. You don't have to wait until you're at rock bottom or your absolute worst to reach out and get some help with dealing with the stress that's going on. As a matter of fact, it's actually better if you don't wait until you're in a crisis, right? Learn how to manage things and figure things out when it's not terrible, so that when it gets worse, you're more prepared for it. And yeah, I wish that people kind of knew that, that I don't have to wait until things are really bad before I ask for help. Mm-hmm.
Totally.